I don't exactly get why you're asking these questions. I murdered Jessica Ridgeway. Okay. I have proof that I did it. There is no other question. You just have to send a squad car, something down here, and I will answer all the questions that you want to ask. Okay.
Today, we're going to talk about the horrific murder of 10-year-old Jessica Ridgeway. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. October 5th, 2012 started as most days did for Jessica Ridgeway. The 10-year-old was living in Westminster, Colorado with her mother, her grandma, and her aunt. Her parents had actually been going through a divorce, so her father did not live in the area. He was actually in Missouri. Jessica's favorite color was purple, and she loved animals, especially her dog. Jessica's mother, Sarah, actually worked overnight, and because of this, Jessica really was quite the independent 10-year-old. Although she was never left alone, either her grandmother or her aunt would watch her while her mother worked. Sarah had just ended her night shift and arrived home around 7:30 and began to help Jessica get ready for school. And this was pretty much their normal routine. Sarah would come home, she'd stay up, she'd get Jessica ready for school, she would see her off to school and then go to sleep. And then obviously by the time Jessica got home, Sarah would be up to see her before she had to go back to work. The 10-year-old girl would actually walk to her school, which was about a mile from her home, but she wouldn't do the whole walk by herself. She would start at her house and then meet her friends at a nearby park, and then they would all walk together. And it was a route that she took every single day. But that day, on October 5th, she never arrived to school. Eventually, the school would realize this, and they called to report Jessica absent, but Sarah, unfortunately, had missed the call. She had been asleep because she had just come off an overnight shift and slept right through it. When she did get the call 8 hours later, she was frantic and called the police. Since Jessica was a very smart girl, her mother instantly knew that Jessica would have never gotten in a car with anyone, that if something happened to her, it was an abduction. And if she wasn't abducted forcibly and she had gotten in a car with someone, that would mean that Jessica knew the person very well and that they were a trusted family friend or family member. So obviously police get there, they start looking at the family right away. Of course, this is very stressful for the family because their daughter is missing and they're being looked at as suspects, but it is the job of police officers to rule out the family first. They start by finding out where Jessica's father is. Remember, him and Sarah are in the process of divorcing and he's supposedly in Missouri. They wanted to make sure that he hadn't kidnapped the girl because they were in a custody dispute. They locate him, he has an alibi, so they can check him off the list. Of course, then they have to turn to Sarah, who's Jessica's mother, and presumably the last person who's seen the girl. After their search kind of came up empty within the family, they put out an Amber Alert for Jessica, and then they begin their search. Police, the community, Jessica's family all get together and start looking for the 10-year-old girl. And then on October 7th, Jessica's backpack would be found, and inside that backpack contained her glasses, boots, urine-soaked clothing, and her water bottle. This terrified her mother because Jessica needed her glasses in order to see. And this backpack was found about 6 miles from Jessica's home. Obviously, police collect this backpack and they actually take DNA off the backpack and put it into the CODIS system. And they actually got a hit on this DNA match. The DNA actually matched DNA that was collected off of a t-shirt in an abduction and attempted assault case about a year earlier. So in May of 2012, a 22-year-old jogger was attacked from behind and dragged into a bush. Her attacker had placed a rag over her mouth, and this was an attempt to chloroform her and knock her out. The attacker had actually tried to make their own chloroform, so it didn't actually work, and the jogger was able to fight her attacker off and get away. Unfortunately, she didn't actually get a good look at her attacker, but she could only describe him by his size and height, and maybe a guess at his age. She said maybe he was in his 20s, but that's really all police had to go off of. And when you learn who that attacker is and what he had in mind for that jogger, it's going to make your skin crawl. At this point, I just want to remind everyone of the trigger warning. We're coming into some graphic details now, so viewer discretion is advised. Human remains were found in Patteridge Park, but this wasn't a normal crime scene. When detectives and forensics got on scene, they were met with a gruesome discovery. They came upon a child-sized torso, but the torso was missing a head, legs, and arms. Eventually, police were able to determine that that body was of 10-year-old Jessica Ridgeway. Through through DNA testing. The medical examiner would determine that not only had the body been washed, probably more than once, but the internal organs of the girl's body had been removed and a foreign object was actually placed inside. And that foreign object was actually a cross placed inside her private areas. It's important to note that the killer could have put this cross anywheres because they had removed the organs from the girl's torso, and that's the specific place that they chose. In Jessica's bag, they also found a cross, and a tip on October 19th would come in that would lead them to Austin Siggs. A neighbor that lived by Mindy and Austin Sigg would go on to say that Austin often wore a cross like that around his neck, and he was very much obsessed with death. So police actually went over there, they questioned him, they got to look around his house, and they didn't find anything. And they did obtain a DNA sample from Austin with his mother Mindy's consent. They had actually been taking the DNA of the neighborhood men to try to match it to the DNA they already had. And then on October 22nd, Austin Sigg had become a bit unhinged. At college that day, he told his friends that he didn't feel well. He felt very wobbly, he was very sick, and that he just overall didn't feel that well. And later that night, he would actually sleep in his mother's bed, which is pretty uncommon for a 17-year-old boy. And then on the very next day, October 23rd, Austin would confess something to his mother Mindy that would leave her in complete and utter shock. He told his mom that he had actually murdered Jessica, but he didn't rape her. His mother, Mindy, called 911, and as we can hear on the tape, she's telling the operator that her son just confessed to the murder of Jessica Ridgeway, and that the remains of Jessica are still in her house. Eventually, Austin is put on the phone, and the dispatcher is talking to him, and he's kind of growing frustrated. He's like, I will tell police everything they need to know when they get here, just send them. But she's trying to keep talking to him and keep him on the line. She wants to make sure that, first of all, he's going to go with police without incident, and then, of course, nothing happens between the time that he's on the phone with her and when police come. And during this time on the phone with the dispatcher, she actually asked him if he committed other crimes, and he said, well, the 22-year-old jogger that was attacked, I did that. He even told the dispatcher where to find Jessica Ridgeway's remains, and they would be in a crawl space in his house. Detectives arrive, they obviously arrest Austin, and they read him the Miranda rights in front of Mindy so that she can waive them because he is a minor, and he does need a parent present during questioning. Austin goes to the police station willingly, and he makes a gruesome and detailed account of what happened to Jessica Ridgeway that day.
Well, when you went out that morning, Friday morning, October 5th, which was early in the morning, and you drove over to Jessica's neighborhood, what were you planning on doing that day?
I had the intent of picking up any female that came across where I was. That it didn't matter what time, where, it just anything.
So you were out, for a better word, hunting?
Yeah, that's the only word I could think of.
And did you know Jessica?
No.
Had you ever seen her before?
No, not at all. She was wrong place, wrong time. It was all random. I was...
You didn't stop the neighborhood or go over to that neighborhood and was looking for her?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been out before looking for somebody?
I had gone out before hunting, as you would call it.
Again, I'm just going to give everyone another trigger warning. I know that I'm repeating myself here, but the details of this crime are incredibly graphic and disturbing. So please be advised as you move forward. So obviously Austin is in the police station and they're asking him what happened, and he goes on to tell them. Austin was very careful about wearing gloves so that he didn't leave any DNA behind. And his brother, in a later interview, even stated that Austin was learning how to kill people because of the classes he was taking at his community college. And so Austin was very careful when he committed this crime to do things that would ensure that he didn't get caught. So he admitted to police that obviously he wore gloves while handling all of her stuff, her backpack, her clothing, and even her body. He would say that he washed her body twice, but he would go on to tell detectives that he didn't rape the 10-year-old girl. But those claims were actually quickly proven to be false when Jessica's torso was examined and there was extensive bruising, cuts, and evidence of sexual assault. According to Austin, he knew that when he abducted the girl that he was going to murder her, but he did go on to tell Jessica that she was going to be safe and that she was going to see her mother again just to keep her calm. Austin would get in his back seat and wait for Jessica to walk by. He would grab her and get her in the Jeep, and then he would bound her hands and feet with zip ties. And so when her mother stated that Jessica would never get in a car with a stranger, she was absolutely correct. Jessica was snatched as she just walked by Austin Sigg's car. He would drive Jessica around for about 20 or 30 minutes before before going to his mother's house. He made sure to park in the garage so nobody seen him bringing Jessica into his house. As they go to the house, he turns on the TV, and he really would torture this girl for quite some time. As they're watching TV, he's cutting off bits of her hair, and eventually the girl became so scared and terrified about what was happening that she had an accident, so he made her go take off all of her clothes and put on a pair of his shorts and a t-shirt. He would take those clothes and then stuff them in her book bag, which was obviously in her book bag when it was found. Eventually, Austin would try to murder Jessica by strangling her with zip ties, but they kept cutting through his hands. So he decided to manually strangle her. And when he was done, he saw that she was still alive. So he placed her in a hot bath and drowned her. He would then leave her in the bathroom, run down to the garage, and grab an electric saw, a utility knife, and a razor. He would then dismember her body. He said that he actually flushed her hands and feet down the toilet along with some other organs, and then the rest of the body parts were placed in a bag. And the next day, Austin realizes that he needs to get rid of the evidence, so he drives around, he discards her book bag 6 miles from her home, where it is found, and then when he realizes police are using cadaver dogs in the search, he decides he needs to get rid of her torso. But instead of just leaving this poor 10-year-old girl's torso intact, he removed all the organs and washed it. And then he would throw it in that field where she was eventually found. So obviously the police go in and they find the rest of Jessica's remains in the crawl space and some of her hair. And he had even admitted in that 911 call that he placed a small hand-carved cross on Jessica's body. But as I said earlier, the cross was found inside her body. Anna Salter, a psychologist, noted that Austin showed signs of a sadistic necrophilia with psychotic traits, but that he wasn't truly psychotic. She didn't actually formally diagnose Austin, she hadn't met with him, but she did base it on the details of the case and the confession tapes, and she would eventually go to court and testify to this. Austin would receive life in prison for his crimes, and if you're like me, you just want to know why somebody would do something like this to this poor 10-year-old child. And Austin really did kind of have a troubled background, but I do think there were some serious warning signs that weren't taken all that serious. In 2008, when Austin was in middle school, his mother, Mindy, actually found pornography on his computer, but it wasn't just any pornography. It would turn out it was child pornography. And as he got older, he would watch more graphic and violent pornography. Austin's pediatrician noted that he had an anxiety disorder, and he thought that it actually stemmed from watching porn at that young age. So he was prescribed medicine for his anxiety, and then he was taken to a faith-based counselor. Austin would state that it didn't help him, and his addiction just got worse and worse. And the fact that Austin knew that he had a problem speaks volumes. Austin actually didn't continue with therapy, but counselors did tell Mindy and Austin's father to be monitoring his computer use at all times. And they apparently didn't do that. It was actually reported that Austin's father, Robert, had a lengthy kind of criminal rap sheet for things like domestic violence, fraud, burglary, and a DWI. Austin's friends would say that he was just kind of a normal but somewhat odd kid. There was something strange about him. He was intelligent by all means. He liked video games and he liked swords, but the one thing that stood out to everyone that knew him was his fascination with death. He did have a girlfriend that he dated through middle school, and she would go on to say that there was no red flags. He was very nice, he was kind to her, and that she didn't think he could ever be capable of doing something like this. Eventually, he wanted to become a mortician, and based on the graphicness of this crime and the removing of the organs, it doesn't surprise me. Mindy and her son Austin had quite a strange relationship. Mindy would joke about Austin's fascination with death to friends and neighbors, and she didn't really think much of it apparently. Austin would eventually drop out of the 11th grade and get his GED before starting college. He was actively involved in doing things like investigating fake crime scenes, and he was even awarded second place in one of those. Later, Jessica's journal from school would be recovered, and in that journal, one of the pages noted, "Do not play in the park alone and watch out for strangers." Apparently, Jessica's school had been teaching the students about safety and obviously stranger danger, and she wrote those things in her journal to remind herself to always be wary of strangers. And this is actually devastating because Jessica was doing exactly what she was told to do. She was wary of strangers. She didn't willingly get in a car with anybody. She simply walked by the wrong car and was snatched. And Austin would even tell police that he didn't plan to take Jessica, that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it just happened. He would go on to say that he had planned to do to that 22-year-old jogger what he had done to Jessica. So had he been able to abduct that jogger, he would have dismembered her and removed her organs. I just feel like there were so many red flags with Austin starting from a very young age, and maybe if he had intervention, maybe if people were watching his internet usage, if he was going to counseling, if he was taking medication, this could have been avoided. And as you can see from the pictures of him at trial, he's very stone-faced, he's very cold. He doesn't show any remorse for what he did. And when you look at him, you just get the sense that he is pure evil. And I firmly believe that he tortured her because he enjoyed doing it. I'm thoroughly convinced that had he not turned himself in, he may have not been caught for quite some time until he attacked again. And Jessica just deserves so much more than what happened to her. She was a happy 10-year-old girl who was just starting her life. She loved animals, she loved the color purple, and she is deeply missed by all that knew her. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. See you next time.